For the second week in a row, Fox's Big Noon Kickoff and Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt have televised live the SEC murdering the Big Ten in the Big Ten's own backyard. I take you to Texas versus Michigan just 8 days ago, where the Longhorns beat the Wolverines 31-12 and were up at 31-6 at some point in the third quarter, and 24-3 at the half. And I take you to Saturday of week 3, just yesterday for those watching on Sunday, to Alabama versus Wisconsin, where the Crimson Tide were up 21-3 at the half, and Luke Fickell did his best Neil Brown impression, where with less than a minute to go in the second half, Alabama drives down 2 plays, 73 yards in 17 seconds, and scores on a Jeremy Bernard 26-yard pass from Jalen Milroe, and the prior long pass again from Jalen Milroe, this time to Ryan Williams, who is at this point Alabama's best wide receiver and might be the nation's best freshman wide receiver. I mean, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State is elite, but Ryan Williams is, I think, neck and neck with him in terms of being a freshman All-American. That kid, and I say kid because he's only 17 years old, is phenomenal, and he plays and looks like a man on the football field. It's incredible. Especially, I want to give praise to him and also praise to Jalen Milroe, who looks like he has seriously matured, as expected, as a passer and also as a scrambler. Just a much better quarterback overall than he was last year, and certainly this time last year in September of 2023. Alabama destroyed Wisconsin, and we're going to be talking about that today on College Football with Sam. Welcome back, college football fans. And before I get into the rest of this video and give you my analysis and dive in deep on what was a murder, a bloodletting in Camp Randall, I want you to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell alongside of that subscribe button, and also share this video around to other college football fans you know, and comment your thoughts down below. Liking the video helps us get into the algorithm and reach more viewers like yourself who love college football. College Football with Sam prides itself on being the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube, and we are aspiring to be the best college football channel on YouTube. And you liking the video helps us to improve, get into the algorithm, earn more money, viewers, and all of that is reinvested back into this channel to help improve it and make its quality superior to what it is now. And right now it is pretty damn good. So if you want good analysis, even if you disagree with it sometimes or very often, hit that subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new content here. And as a subscriber of the channel, you will join our army of close to 20,000 subs. And when we reach 20,000 subscribers here, we'll be doing a giveaway for you. So hit that notification bell so that you can get notified when the giveaway is occurring, when we hit 20,000 subscribers, because there will be a community post for that, and also to watch content here. And of course, as I've already said, but it's very important, comment your reaction to this game down below. This was one of the games that I predicted and I was pretty spot on about. We can just not ignore, but push Purdue Notre Dame and the fact that I depressingly picked the Boilermakers for another day. I will be reacting to that game. That was one I totally got wrong. This, though, my score prediction was Alabama 45, Wisconsin 20. And maybe if Tyler Van Dyke was healthy, Wisconsin would have been closer to 20. But 42-10 is pretty close. Alabama quickly took this game over. Wisconsin scored the first few set of points, a field goal from Nathaniel Vakos. Alabama then drove down the field and they tried a field goal attempt and they missed. Alabama has a very great kicker, impressive kicker in Graham Nicholson, but he was 0 of 1 on field goals for the day. 6 of 6 on extra points, though. Vakos was 1 of 2 on field goals, 1 of 1 on extra points. And when those extra points build up, well, that's an indicator of who scored more touchdowns and therefore who won the game. In this case, a blowout. Alabama had 407 total yards to Wisconsin's 290. They had no turnovers, but Wisconsin had 2. Alabama had 18 first downs to Wisconsin's 17. And Wisconsin controlled the clock. They had 34 minutes and 16 seconds of possession, but they couldn't do anything with it. Wisconsin, at one point, had a long drive where they took like 8 minutes off the clock, 17 plays, 75 yards, and they struggled to score that touchdown. They also had a 3-minute drive on 10 plays, 57 yards, and they shanked their field goal. And then a 7-play, 16-yard drive, which took 4 minutes off the clock, and they had to punt. Wisconsin was just being scrappy and tough. They were doing what they had to do to stay in the game. 3 of 4 on 4th down to compensate for 3 of 14 on 3rd down. Alabama, meanwhile, was 8 of 14 on 3rd down, and they passed for 10.3 yards per attempt and ran for 5.3 yards per carry, as opposed to Wisconsin passing for 4.5 yards per attempt and only running for 3.6 yards per carry. If there's anything positive to take away for Wisconsin and negative for Alabama, it's in relationship to Alabama's run defense and Wisconsin's rush offense. Wisconsin can probably steal a few games and maybe get to bowl eligibility, or maybe even above 500 if they run the ball and their defense plays extremely well, efficiently, doesn't give up a lot of big plays, which they did against Alabama, but you're not going to be seeing another offense like Alabama's that has their explosive playmaking capability outside of maybe Penn State and maybe Oregon. And I don't think, especially in the case with Dillon Gabriel, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that deep passing attack that Alabama just worked Wisconsin with over and over and over again. And as for Alabama's run defense, Chez Mellusi is good. This offensive line that features, Riley Malman, Joe Huber, and others on that offensive line, they're going to run on you. And Wisconsin has a legitimate offensive line, so there's no shame in allowing 3.6 yards per carry. But a Georgia offensive line, if Tate Ratledge is healthy and with Xavier Truss and the players they have on that offensive line, that could be problematic. And I'm trying to think who else Alabama plays, like Tennessee with Lance Hurd and Dylan Sampson and Nico Iamaleava and the rushing attack and just overall team that Tennessee is, or if Alabama plays Texas in the SEC championship game, those could be matchups where those teams have great offensive lines. In the case of Texas and Georgia, if healthy, elite, and they're more of a complete team than Wisconsin, that could be problematic. But let's focus on the here and now. Let's start off with Wisconsin, because we talk about the winners on this show last. We saved the best for last. Wisconsin's season, as I already hinted to, is pretty much in salvage mode. When you lose at home by 32 points, 42-10, you have to scramble and you have to change something. It was the same thing with Michigan after Texas. It was the realization of the staff, the fan base, of analysts. I feel like the Texas win over Michigan was much more shocking than Alabama's win over Wisconsin, but there can be similar themes applied. The fact that Wisconsin is just at this moment that distant from the top, and credit, it's year 2 in a rebuild with Luke Fickell, and I think Texas did a better job of dominating Michigan than Alabama did dominating Wisconsin. Honestly, Wisconsin did a better job in the first half of driving the ball against Alabama than Michigan did against Texas, and their offense looked more competent, but that's also a drawback in a way, because Wisconsin they've looked bad through 3 games, and they don't even have the talent, not even close to what Alabama or Texas have, but they don't have the talent that Michigan has, or Penn State, or USC, teams that are not top 10 in talent, certainly not top 5, again by recruiting, but are certainly top 20. and fulfill the blue chip ratio. Wisconsin's very far away from them in terms of talent, and I would say in terms of current ceiling. Wisconsin has struggled at almost everything this year. Their defense has not done a great job of stopping the run, not just in this game, but South Dakota ran over them, Western Michigan ran over them. I think a large part of that is due to their 3-3-5, 2-4-5 scheme. Like, they don't have that presence at defensive line that Nebraska does, where you can utilize the 3-3-5 and just kill it in run defense. Like Iowa State, for example, they really had to step up against Iowa to shut down that run game, but that can be a consequence of the 3-3-5, which is meant to make your defense faster and perform better against, the spread and more explosive offenses, is you have a harder time stopping the teams that are just elite at controlling the game. And Alabama can do both. They can both control the game with their offensive line, they can run the football, they can slow it down, and Kalen DeBoer has shown even at Washington, he doesn't like to run fast-pace up-tempo all the time. Washington last season was impressively good at controlling the clock with how good they were at passing the ball and with some of the questions they had in running the ball. Their O-line, receivers, quarterback, tight ends, running backs, everything about that offense last year with Kalen DeBoer was better suited for passing instead of running. And they controlled the clock by passing the football in almost a very Jeff Brom-esque way, like he would do at Purdue before he went to Louisville. And just no matter what Wisconsin tried to do, Alabama always had an answer. Alabama punked them. And unlike, again, let's go back to the example of Michigan, or let's even go to the example of Michigan State, for example. Michigan and Michigan State, and am I really going? I'm going to go there. Minnesota. Those three teams I mentioned are certainly not top 10 at this current moment. But they have a non-negotiable that I don't think Wisconsin does. They have a player or a set of players on offense who can control the game, who can break a game. Michigan State has Aiden Childs. They have Nick Marsh. And their running back room is good with K'Ron Lynch-Adams and Nate Carter. It's just as good as Wisconsin's, if not better. Minnesota has Darius Taylor and Ariante Irsay, and they have Daniel Jackson. Wisconsin basically only has Will Pauling as a player who can carry the team. You go to Michigan, they have Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards and Colston Loveland. And Minnesota and Michigan State have the capability, just like Wisconsin, to have a great offensive line. Also, I don't know about Minnesota, but Michigan State and Michigan definitely have a better defensive front than Wisconsin does. The point is, Wisconsin does not have a non-negotiable on offense or defense to force teams into being one-dimensional, to break teams, to secure big wins. Wisconsin will have to scrape their way by in the remainder of their schedule. That's what they'll have to do against every team they play, except for maybe Purdue and maybe Northwestern. Nothing will come easy because, especially with Tyler Van Dyke out, and it's not like he was great before his injury, and I hope that he gets healthy, but he was clearly better than Braden Locke. You could see in, Locke's performance against Alabama, his performance with Wisconsin last year when Mordecai was hurt, and in Van Dyke's career. Van Dyke is a much better quarterback, and he has the potential at times to play like a quarterback who could be a non-negotiable, though he was never consistent in that. Wisconsin has, again, like I said, they've struggled at just about everything. Even their secondary yesterday. They have Ricardo Hallman and Hunter Wohler, and their secondary is awesome, but they don't have like what Ohio State has right now in the secondary. They don't have what Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State had last year in the secondary. They don't have what Notre Dame has in their defensive back room. They don't have 5 great to elite players starting there. So there will be holes, especially when Wisconsin is trying to stack the box to stop Alabama. And that's what they were doing, because Alabama has a starting five on the O-line that might be the nation's best. They don't have depth there, which is probably, along with the defensive line play, the only other concern for Alabama is if one of your five offensive linemen gets hurt, does the house of cards fall apart? Because that's what happened against South Florida. But with Wisconsin, Van Dyke's out for the season. And at this point, looking at their remaining schedule, they're 2-1 right now. They haven't started conference play. They get a bye, and then they have to travel to USC. USC, we'll see who they are against Michigan. But in all reality, they're better than Wisconsin. I've watched USC. USC, their offensive line's worse than Wisconsin's. Their defensive line is similar. Wisconsin is a much better defense, but it's on the road, and USC has a quarterback in Miller Moss who could be elite and is at worst near elite. They have one of the nation's most dynamic and explosive receiver rooms, and they have a better staff at this point. Like, when you factor in D'Anton Lynn, Riley being an elite offensive coordinator and also a good head coach, their staff is similar to, if not slightly better, than Wisconsin's based off of what I have watched and what I have studied. And that being a road game just will make that it'll make it difficult for Wisconsin, especially if, let's say, USC, like, whether they win or lose against Michigan, if they beat Michigan, they're going to have a ton of energy, and it will be a home environment where the fans will be energized. If they lose to Michigan, they're going to be angry. They just will, because I don't think they're poorly coached enough. For example, Riley's issues are not against the small teams or the medium teams. They're against the big teams, and Wisconsin's not a big team. If they lose to Michigan, they'll take their anger out on Wisconsin. If they beat Michigan, well, the momentum's rolling. Purdue is up next. That should be a win. Wisconsin's owned Purdue, and they looked horrible. At Rutgers will be challenging because Rutgers has an awesome offensive line and a running back in Kyle Monangai who will break that Wisconsin defensive line. Northwestern on the road after Rutgers could be a trap game before Wisconsin hosts Penn State, but Northwestern has looked lifeless, specifically on offense. And then Penn State comes to town. They have to travel to Iowa next. Then they get a bye, host Oregon, play at Nebraska, host Minnesota. Wisconsin could easily go 4-8, 5-7, 6-6 even looks unlikely right now, and 7-5 based off of how they've performed in the first 3 weeks. 7-5 would be miraculous. Like, that and maybe 8-4 would definitely put Luke Fickell in the conversation for Coach of the Year, because this schedule is, I'm telling you, it's very tough, and Wisconsin has not looked good. They're limited personnel-wise, and their coaching staff, I have to say, is a little disappointing given the names that are on the staff, in my mind. But let's turn our attention to Alabama. Alabama has a limitless ceiling. That's my takeaway from this game. They run the ball well. They pass the ball well. They can limit the ground attack. They can play a bend but don't break defense. They can get you off the field quickly. They can just drown you out in a variety of different ways. And after yesterday, after week 3, Saturday, if you're watching on Sunday, I saw Georgia look incredibly vulnerable, like they deeply missed Brock Bowers and Todd Monken. I looked at Texas, and Quinn Ewers went down. Hopefully he is healed quickly. And Arch Manning came in and did very well. But Texas does still have some questions in the sense that they have not faced a team yet who can competently pass the football. Michigan's awful at passing. Colorado State sucks. And UTSA is not what they were 2 years ago or 3 years ago, for example. Like, Texas still has some unproven things. Granted, Alabama does too, but that's the point I'm trying to make, is we don't know if Texas is clearly better than Alabama. It looks like it right now. I think they're the more complete team. Their win over Michigan was more impressive than Alabama's over Wisconsin's. But Alabama put on such a show yesterday to where if you want to rank them number one, I have no issue with that. And by rank, I don't mean strength of schedule wise or resume wise. I mean power ratings wise. If you want to rank them number one, I have no problem with it. They're number 2 right now in FPI, 2 points ahead of Ohio State and less than a half point behind Texas. If they beat Georgia in 2 weeks, because they have a bye in week 4, they will be the nation's number 1 team, both in resume, in perception, and in power ratings. They would be number 1. They would. They looked, the way that Jalen Milroe is comfortably throwing the ball all across the field was impressive. The way that he ran the ball with such breakaway speed, maybe I'm not viewing this correctly, but he looked faster than he did last year. Like, he didn't just get better as a passer. Milroe also improved as a scrambler. I'm seeing him breaking away from defensive backs and from linebackers, and the linebackers at Wisconsin are fast. After all, 3-3-5 defense meant to counteract speed, and Mike Tressel is one of the nation's best defensive coordinators, and they couldn't do anything against Alabama. Alabama had a 10-minute possession disadvantage, and because of the fact that they were so efficient in scoring, they were able to, dink and dime and dunk down the field all over Madison. They even put in their backup quarterback, Ty Simpson, in Wisconsin's own house. That's how dominant they were. It was unbelievable from Alabama. I, of course, predicted Alabama to hang a 50-burger in Madison, but the way they did it was impressive to watch, especially with Ryan Williams constantly getting behind, Hunter Wohler, Ricardo Hallman, and that great secondary of the Badgers. That was 4 receptions, 78 yards, 19.5 yards per reception, and a touchdown. That was insanely impressive. Had a long 47. That was the one that he had right before the half, and then Jeremy Bernard followed that up with a 26-yard reception, and he had a 31-yard receiving touchdown with 20 seconds to go in the first quarter. Just an impressive overall performance, a dominant performance from the Crimson Tide. Again, they had 407 total yards. Their defense held Wisconsin to 290 total yards, but only 10 points, and they forced 2 turnovers. It was an impressive performance, what can I say? And their ceiling is limitless, and I will tell you, here and now, that Kalen DeBoer is one of the nation's best head coaches, and with the way that he is recruiting, and the way he has utilized this roster, and the way that he has developed, Alabama is not taking a step back from what they were over the previous 3 seasons of the Nick Saban era. They're not. I don't know if DeBoer will do what Nick Saban did in the COVID year, where they had one of the most dominant teams of all time. I would suspect that Alabama can put on a 2018-2019 type performance on offense with Kalen DeBoer, who's an expert with quarterbacks, who's a wizard on offense. And Alabama had elite teams those seasons. Tua Tagovailoa got hurt in 2019, and that kind of ended the year. And in 2018, Clemson came in with a better game plan and an elite defense and punked Alabama in the national championship game in just 1 game. So the way that they're performing, I just think is impressive. And the way that they are performing off the field, in recruiting, in the, I think, strides that I've seen with Alabama in the trenches, specifically on the offensive line, that ties back to strength and conditioning, the toughness of this team, the fact that new and young receivers are stepping up, and this might be one of the better receiver rooms in the country after losing Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton, and after Alabama really flailing on, I would say, their receiver recruiting and development over the previous few years. Not having like Jalen Waddle, or not having Devonta Smith, or other players like Calvin Ridley like they've had historically with Nick Saban. It's incredible. And I think that to say that Kalen DeBoer is not a good head coach is at this point intellectual dishonesty. He's built a great staff. He has a great team, an elite team at this point through the season. And another thing, too, to recognize is that for all of Alabama's faults, there is no team in college football this year outside of maybe Texas that hasn't shown vulnerability through 3 games. And again, with Texas, they faced a Michigan team who couldn't pass the football. So we don't know what Texas's defense is to a full degree. We know they have one of the best offenses in the country, and their defense has to be pretty darn good for the fact that they, shut out Colorado State, held UTSA to 7, and held Michigan really to 6 points until garbage time. So outside of Texas, there has not been a team this year that hasn't looked vulnerable in at least one of their games. And I think Texas still probably has some vulnerabilities that have yet to be shown. It is hard for even the best teams in all of college football to not look vulnerable. It's tough. Alabama's looked that way against a USF team that they're good for the group of 5, but bad for the Power 4, probably. And what I see is that the door to the national championship is wide open. I still think that with the talent Georgia has and what they've brought back, that it is their year to lose, but that doesn't mean they can't lose it. And right now, Alabama looks like one of the best, potentially the best team in the SEC. The only team I would put ahead of Bama right now, mainly based off of their Week 3 performance, would be Texas. If you want to factor in everything else, Texas, Georgia, and Alabama are neck and neck right there. That's the top 3 in my mind. Their ceiling is limitless, and they have weapons and weapons and more weapons to tear any defense in the nation apart. My MVP for this game is Jalen Milroe. 12 of 17 for 196 yards, 14 carries for 75 yards, and 5 total touchdowns. I picked him to win the Heisman in the preseason, and while he didn't put up jaw-dropping numbers in terms of yardage in this game, he showed that he's improved as a passer, even improved as a scrambler, and he's versatile and diverse in the ways that he can attack defenses. And those 5 total touchdowns, that's an impressive feat itself, regardless of who you play. So if he keeps putting up this type of performance and, has a big game against Georgia, a big game against Tennessee, etc., I think he's well on track to winning the Heisman. And as he gets better throughout the year, he could be the nation's best player come the end of the season. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman Patreon members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Kind of Little OH, Ismar, Tyler Nye, and Chilton Kush for being All-American members. Thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being All-Conference members. Have a great day, guys. I will see you all soon. And if you want to check out my Patreon page and also merchandise store to support the community, check those out via the links in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And also join our Discord server via the link in the pinned comment. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all soon. Go Badgers, and go Crimson Tide.